Hello, BookTube. As you know, one of the February BookTube events that's ongoing is FFS, February Fantasy Stories, which is created by the Bookish Bryants and has a whole list of great co-hosts. If I remember, I always forget this, but if I remember, I will leave a link to the whole list of co-hosts down below so you can see what kind of content is being made. And the goal of FFS is the same as it was for New Worlds November, which is just to read more of this genre, in this case fantasy, specifically if you want to, through the lens of shorter works, of anthologized short stories. And that's, for our purposes, anything that's under 250 pages, under 200 pages, I would say under 50 pages, an actual short story, just for myself. And we broke it into categories. And the first category was classic fantasy, anything written before 1971. And then we went into sword and sorcery, which is largely eponymized by Conan the Barbarian. Usually set in a very, very distant mythical past where a character fights against not only warlords and bandits and whatnot, but also forces of the supernatural using the same tools, using muscle and swords or axes or shields or whatever. Things that you wouldn't think would work against the supernatural, hence the kind of attractive contrast there. And the third week is Grimdark, dark fantasy or grimdark. Now, these obviously shade into each other, right? A classical fantasy, for instance, written before 1971, is chock-a-block up to its eyeballs with sword and sorcery fantasy. They're almost synonymous. And dark fantasy is almost always, has been until just comparatively recently, almost synonymous with sword and sorcery. So it's possible to get a lot of reading done in these Venn diagrams overlap, as it were. But one of the permutations of dark fantasy that has a modern stamp on it is grimdark fantasy, the thing that has been called grimdark fantasy. I think that term comes out of Warhammer. I seem to remember watching a video by a YouTuber who was a big grimdark fan, who mentioned that it came out of Warhammer, the world of Warhammer. I don't know. I'm not up on that world. And one of our foremost experts on that world no longer makes BookTube videos. Pints and paperbacks. Come back to us, please. But when it comes to grimdark, I admit I'm not that much of a fan of its current incarnation. Because I know there'll be grimdark fans who'll say it doesn't have to be that way, or not all grimdark, or whatnot, but it seems to me that one of the hallmark characteristics of grimdark fantasy is no heroism. And you call it old-fashioned of me, call it Jesuitical of me, but I like there to be heroism in my stories. It doesn't have to be normal heroism. It can be downtrodden. It can be self-doubting. It can, like, for instance, a classic subversion of the whole idea is in the two-book sequence Mordant's Need by Stephen R. Donaldson, about a mousy, self-effacing, self-doubting young woman from our world who gets transported through mirrors into a fantasy world. She is not the hero that they were trying to summon. And neither is the tripping over himself, clumsy young man that she falls in love with when she gets there. We know who the Sorcerer Council of Mordant are trying to summon. They tell us, they show us who they're trying to summon. A stereotypical hero, a gigantic armor-clad, laser-wielding science fiction hero. That doesn't work out too well. And most of the other stereotypically heroic characters in Mordant's Need don't seem. They look stereotypically heroic, but they end up being anything but. True heroism ends up residing in the last places that you would look for it. I'm okay with that. But for there to be none at all, for it to be Game of Thrones, specifically HBO's Game of Thrones, where there isn't even a slight flicker of it, where everyone is petty and sordid and unbelievably violent and self-interested and can tip at any minute, a la the concluding episodes, into being a genocidal maniac, without anyone acting all that surprised, and with everyone ready to kill everyone else at any time, arrows coming out of nowhere, axes up the crotch, that sort of thing. If that's all you're doing, if you're doing that, if you have violence, but you also have a heroic arc, heroism, redemption of some kind, I can put up with that, even though it seems to me to be adolescent and all the worst that not worried. But if that's all you're doing, you're going to lose me as an interested reader pretty quick. And it has seemed to me that Grimdark, which is the aspect of dark fantasy I want to concentrate on for the third week of FFS, does only that. It seems to me that the examples of Grimdark that actually have any kind of redeeming quality to any character are few and far between. It seems to me that the only difference between the characters in this sub-genre is the way in which they kill people. They all kill people, and they don't care about it. And they'll kill their friends, and they'll kill their family, or they'll kill the people who kill their friends and family, and only to find out that their friends and family are still alive and have been tortured for 30 years, and to the point where their friends and family now want to kill them, and they have to kill their friends. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about. It ends up being just a tour, I think, of the bottom sellers, of the writer's psyche, of people who shouldn't be writing. They should be in intensive therapy. But I realized from that description that I may be selling this whole sub-genre short. Certainly it has lots and lots of devoted fans. Joe Abercrombie's career alone is proof of that. So, for FFS, I am going to try to pry open that part of my mind and see if I can read a variety of FFS short stories that might show me what I'm missing. That might show me why this particular area of fantasy has such devoted fans. I thought immediately, okay, well, Joe Abercrombie's books are out, of course, they're too long, and so are everybody else's books. Grimdark tends to be long. There are very big books in the fantasy section of Barnes & Noble. I went and looked. So I turned to Kindle. I turned to Kindle Unlimited, which is a feature that Kindle has, where if you pay, you get it's sort of a Netflix subscription type thing, where for a nominal amount of money, and I mean that, I wouldn't use that throwaway term if the money actually bit, but it's a nominal amount of money. It's not much at all. You don't notice it. And for that amount of money, you can read for free up to, I think, 20 books in the Kindle ecosystem, which is enormous. It's absolutely vast. The catch being you can't go beyond a certain number of books that you have taken out, and you don't get to keep them. They're part of Kindle Unlimited. If you were to cancel Kindle Unlimited, you wouldn't have any of those books anymore. And in order to keep any one of those books, you have to lose one book that you can add to your total. Even then, there might be a limitation even beyond that. It might be, let's say, for instance, that you added 20 books to your Kindle Unlimited account. And one of those 20 books you really, really love, but you just don't have the money, you just don't want to buy it. I'm not sure that you could keep it there forever. I'm pretty sure that it would cycle out eventually. Anyway, so that's one of the drawbacks, is you can't keep these things. I use Kindle Unlimited for exploration purposes, as I will be doing for this week of FFS, and also as a kind of sampling thing, much the way that I often do at the library, when I used to do this same thing at the new releases section of the library, which is an audition to see whether or not the author has earned my money. I do this anyway with the samples that Kindle gives you, and Barnes & Noble and Kobo. They all give you little samples of every book that they have, so that you can take it's sort of the virtual equivalent of you standing at a table in a bookstore and flipping through the first few pages. You don't usually get much, but you get enough to make a sense of it. And if I get a whole chapter of a book, an ebook of some kind, a self-published book or a small published book of some kind, if I get a whole chapter of that and I read that chapter and very, very much want to read the next chapter, then the author has earned the price of that book. Then that they're doing their job. They've done their part. They've won a reader. So I will then buy the book. And even if I don't, even if there are, I'm not overwhelmingly tempted to get the rest of the book, but the chapter has promise, I will still make a mental note. And that is invaluable. Kindle Unlimited has given me an invaluable service for getting to know authors and learning whether or not maybe I want to read more of them. So I went to Kindle Unlimited to see if they had what I was looking at. Turns out they have exactly what I'm looking for the Grimdark part of FFS. And that is this, Knee Deep in Grit. This is an anthology on Kindle Unlimited of stories from the first 2 years of Grimdark Fiction magazine, which I did not even know existed. So here we've got Knee Deep in Grit. It's got an introduction by someone who also did one of the stories. This is a common thing in anthologies. If you were to pull down from the shelf your copy of the Hardtube anthology Served Cold, you would see that the same sexy influencer who wrote the introduction also has a story in the table of contents. What that you say? You don't yet have a copy of Served Cold? Well, as long as you're going to be on Amazon, feel free to buy a copy of the anthology called Served Cold. There are a number of books on YouTube, on Amazon, that have that title. In retrospect, that title should have been workshopped just a bit because it's a little too common. There's only one that will come up in a search with my name. Okay? But anyway, to get back to the subject, I didn't know there was a Grimdark magazine. I had no idea. And true to form, their cover copy for this anthology is it is really good. So I wanted to read it to you. They're definitely having fun with their own little niche. The cover copy is, for the first time, 2 years of fiction from Grimdark magazine are printed on dead trees and bound together like captive slaves to be read or reread and proudly placed among your favorite tomes on your bookshelf. The stories are printed on dead trees and bound together like captive slaves. So I will be reading Knee Deep in Grit for the upcoming week, free on Amazon, on Kindle Unlimited. I mean, it's not free in the sense that I do pay an annual subscription, but considering how much I use it, I consider this to be free, and I will use this in both ways. So number one, if I read this anthology and it's a really, really good anthology, then I will buy a print copy. I bet it's expensive, but I'll do it anyway because the authors have earned it. Or maybe I'll buy the ebook. But also, in terms of auditioning, I will be looking at every one of these authors. Look at all those authors that are in here and lots more. I'll be looking at every one of those authors and seeing if any one of those authors is someone I want to follow, someone I want to know better. So I'll be trying that, but I wanted to make this video to let you know what the shape of my FFS is going to be for the Grimdark week, and also to ask you. I know there are a lot of you who like Grimdark Fantasy a lot more than I do. It'd be hard to like it less than I do. So there are a lot of you who are fans, and I would love to know, your tricks for enjoying it, your favorite authors, even if they're not short stories, recommendations that you have, your journey with Grimdark. I'd love to hear all of that. So feel free to sound off in the comments field or to email me. But anyway, that is FFS for this week. I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.